My fiancé kept making excuses for his toxic sister, who targeted me for months until I threatened to call off our wedding. When he finally sent her a message setting boundaries, she responded by claiming I was abusive and showed up uninvited to our wedding. Hi Reddit. My fiancé Timothy, 29M, and I, 27F, have been together for 3 years, engaged for 6 months. We've had a solid relationship. He's generally considerate, and we rarely fight about anything serious. But there's this one massive issue that's been eating away at me for almost a year now, and it recently came to a head in a way I never expected. The problem is his younger sister, Kate, 25F. She's always been part of the package with Timothy. They're close, talk almost every day, and she's involved in most family events. When we first started dating, Kate seemed fine with me. Not overly warm, but polite enough. She'd make small talk when we ran into each other, and she came to a few dinners at our place without incident. Things changed about 10 months ago. I can't pinpoint exactly when or why, but Kate's behavior toward me shifted. It started small. She'd make little comments during family gatherings that felt off. Once, at Timothy's parents' house, I mentioned I was trying a new recipe I'd found online. Kate jumped in and said something about how she'd tried that same recipe months ago, and everyone agreed it was bland. She said this in front of Timothy's whole family. I hadn't even made the dish yet. Another time, we were all at a restaurant for Timothy's dad's birthday. I ordered fish, and Kate made a face and said she couldn't understand how anyone could eat something that smelled like that. She said it loud enough that the table next to us turned to look. Timothy's mom changed the subject quickly, but I sat there for the rest of the meal barely touching my food. These comments kept happening. Kate would mention how my hair looked different, but not in a complimentary way. She'd point out if I wore the same outfit twice. Once, she told me in front of everyone that I had something in my teeth, even though I'd just checked in the bathroom minutes before and there was nothing there. I checked again immediately and my teeth were clean. She just shrugged. The worst part was that these moments were always in group settings, never when it was just the two of us. And they were always just subtle enough that calling them out would make me look overly sensitive. Timothy noticed a few times and would give me a sympathetic look, but he never said anything to Kate in the moment. About 6 months ago, things escalated. Kate started telling other family members things I supposedly said. Timothy's cousin mentioned to me at a barbecue that she heard I thought their grandmother's house was outdated and needed renovation. I never said anything remotely like that. I love their grandmother, and her house is full of character. When I told Timothy about it later, he said Kate must have misunderstood something I said, but I never discussed their grandmother's house with Kate at all. 2 weeks after that, Timothy's mom called him, upset. Kate had told her that I complained about how often Timothy's family expected us to attend events, and that I found their family dinners boring. None of that was true. I actually enjoyed spending time with his family, even though Kate's behavior was making it harder. Timothy called Kate and asked her about it. She claimed she was just trying to help by giving his mom a heads up that I might be feeling overwhelmed. She said she must have gotten her wires crossed. Timothy accepted that explanation. He told me Kate wasn't good at reading social situations and probably meant well. That response bothered me more than Kate's actual behavior. She was clearly good enough at reading situations to know exactly what to say to make me look bad. The incidents kept piling up. Kate told Timothy's brother that I'd made a rude comment about his wife's cooking. She told Timothy's aunt that I'd rolled my eyes during a conversation about the aunt's job. None of it was true, but it was getting harder to defend myself because it was always my word against hers. About 4 months ago, I hit a breaking point. We were at Timothy's parents' house for Sunday dinner. Kate was there with her boyfriend, along with Timothy's brother and his family. During dinner, Kate's phone rang. She answered it, had a brief conversation, then hung up and looked directly at me. She announced to the entire table that her friend had just called to complain about me. According to Kate, her friend Sarah had run into me at the grocery store earlier that week, tried to say hello, and I'd completely ignored her and walked away. I was stunned. I hadn't been to that grocery store in over a month. I told Kate there must be some mistake because I hadn't seen Sarah anywhere recently. Kate insisted it had happened. She said Sarah was really hurt by it. Timothy's mom looked uncomfortable. His dad cleared his throat and changed the subject. After dinner, I pulled Timothy aside and told him we needed to talk about Kate. I explained that this pattern had been going on for months, that Kate was deliberately trying to make me look bad, and that I needed him to address it with her directly. Timothy said he would talk to her. 3 days later, Timothy told me he'd spoken to Kate. He said she felt terrible about the misunderstandings and that she'd apologized. She explained that she'd been under a lot of stress with her job and her boyfriend, and sometimes she mixed things up or didn't communicate clearly. Timothy said she promised to be more careful going forward. I asked Timothy if Kate had specifically acknowledged that the grocery store incident never happened. He got quiet. Then he admitted that Kate still insisted it had happened, but that maybe her friend Sarah had mistaken someone else for me. That answer told me everything I needed to know. Kate hadn't apologized for anything real. She'd just given Timothy an excuse he was willing to accept. Over the next month, Kate's behavior didn't improve. If anything, she got bolder. She started posting on social media about how some people were fake and two-faced, with timing that made it obvious she was talking about me. She'd make plans with Timothy, and then act surprised when I showed up too, as if she'd expected him to come alone. Once, she called Timothy while we were having dinner at home, and I could hear her voice through the phone, loud and animated. When Timothy hung up, he said Kate had just wanted to chat. But I'd heard her ask him what he was doing, and when he must have mentioned dinner with me, her tone had changed completely. The situation that finally broke me happened 6 weeks ago. Timothy and Kate were working on a project together. Timothy does freelance graphic design, and Kate had asked him to help with branding for a small event planning business she was trying to start. They'd been meeting up once or twice a week to work on it. I was fine with that. They're siblings, and I wasn't going to interfere with their relationship. One evening, Timothy came home from one of these meetings and found me sitting on the couch. I'd been there for about an hour, not watching TV or reading, just sitting. He asked if I was okay. I told him I needed to talk about Kate again. I explained that I'd reached a point where hearing Kate's name made my stomach hurt. I described how I'd started dreading family events because I knew she'd be there. I told him about lying awake at night, replaying her comments and trying to figure out what I'd done to make her dislike me so much. I mentioned that I'd started declining some invitations to family gatherings, and I knew Timothy had noticed. Timothy listened. When I finished, he said he understood this was hard for me, but that Kate was his sister, and he couldn't just cut her out of his life. He said the project they were working on together was important to her, and he'd committed to helping her finish it. He asked if I needed him to stop working with her. That question made everything worse. I told him no, I would never ask him to abandon a commitment. But the fact that he'd asked, as if it was even a question, as if he needed me to explicitly tell him to choose me over someone who'd been systematically trying to damage my reputation for months, that hurt more than anything Kate had done. I told him I didn't want him to quit the project. But I also told him that if he couldn't see how serious this situation was, if he couldn't recognize that his sister was deliberately targeting me, then we had a bigger problem than I'd realized. Timothy got defensive. He said Kate had her flaws, but she wasn't malicious. He said I was reading too much into things. He reminded me that Kate was stressed and going through a hard time. I didn't argue. I just told him I needed some time to think. The real issue now is our wedding. Kate is supposed to be one of Timothy's attendants. We'd asked her months ago, back when I still thought things might improve. The wedding is in 8 months. We've booked the venue, sent save the dates, and started planning details. But I can't imagine standing at the altar, promising to build a life with Timothy, while his sister stands beside him after everything she's done. I've tried to picture that day. Kate in the wedding party photos. Kate at the reception, probably making comments about my dress or the food or something else designed to undermine the whole event. Kate being part of every major milestone in our marriage because Timothy will never set boundaries with her. Last week I told Timothy that if Kate was still in the wedding party, I wasn't sure I could go through with the wedding. He asked if I was serious. I said yes. He hasn't given me an answer yet about what he plans to do. We've barely talked this past week. He's been sleeping on the couch, supposedly because he's been staying up late working, but I think he's avoiding the conversation. The worst part is that Timothy's unwillingness to confront Kate isn't even about her behavior. It's about the fact that he was willing to tell me she'd apologized when she hadn't. He lied to make me feel better in the moment, rather than actually dealing with the problem. That lie made me question everything. If he'd lie about that, what else would he lie about to keep the peace? I love Timothy. I want to marry him, But I can't marry into a family where his sister is allowed to treat me like this, and where Timothy will choose the path of least resistance instead of standing up for me. I keep thinking about what our future would look like. Every holiday with Kate making subtle digs. Every family photo with her finding ways to exclude me or make me uncomfortable. Decades of this. I've started thinking that maybe calling off the wedding is the right choice for my own sanity. But that feels extreme. We've built a life together. We have an apartment, shared friends and plans. Throwing that away because of his sister seems almost ridiculous when I write it out. But then I remember sitting on that couch, waiting for Timothy to come home, with that knot in my stomach. I remember how many times I've made excuses to skip family events. I remember checking my phone anxiously whenever Timothy's family group chat lights up, wondering what Kate has said about me now. So here I am. Wedding in 8 months. Fiancé who won't set boundaries. Sister who seems determined to push me out. And me, trying to figure out if loving someone is enough when they won't protect you from the people who are supposed to become your family too. Update 1. I wasn't planning to update this, but things have developed in ways I didn't expect. A lot of people messaged me asking what happened, so here it is. After I made my original post, Timothy and I spent almost a week barely speaking. He was staying late at his office most nights. When he came home, he'd eat dinner, work on his laptop, and then go to bed. We were living like roommates. Finally, last Tuesday, Timothy came home earlier than usual. He sat down across from me at the kitchen table and said we needed to talk. I braced myself for him to say the wedding was off, or that he'd chosen his sister over me. Instead, he apologized. Not a surface-level apology, but a real one. He said he'd spent the past week thinking about everything I'd said, and that he'd also started paying closer attention to Kate's behavior. He admitted he'd been making excuses for her because confronting the truth was uncomfortable. He said he'd convinced himself that I was being overly sensitive, because that was easier than accepting that his sister was deliberately cruel. Timothy told me he'd decided to send Kate a message. He wanted to do it over text, so there would be a record, and so he could take time to word it carefully. He showed me the draft. It was direct. He listed specific incidents where Kate had made false claims about me or had made targeted comments. He told her the behavior needed to stop immediately, and that if it didn't, he'd be limiting his contact with her. The message was firm, but not insulting. I suggested only one small change to the wording, and Timothy sent it that night. Kate's response came within an hour. It was long, and it was bad. She denied everything. She said I'd been manipulating Timothy against her since the beginning of our relationship. She claimed I was jealous of their sibling bond and was trying to isolate him from his family. She said the incidents Timothy had mentioned were either complete fabrications or things I had twisted to make her look bad. Then Kate said she wanted to meet with Timothy in person, with a neutral third party present, to discuss the situation properly. She suggested Timothy's mom as the mediator. Timothy responded that he wasn't interested in a mediated conversation, and that his message had said everything he needed to say. Kate's next message came 2 hours later. She said that if Timothy was going to side with me over his own sister, then she needed to make sure the rest of the family knew the truth about what kind of person I was. She said she'd be reaching out to Timothy's parents to explain the situation. Timothy immediately called his parents. He gave them a summary of what had been happening with Kate, and warned them that she might contact them with a skewed version of events. His mom was quiet on the phone. His dad said they'd suspected something was going on, but hadn't wanted to interfere. The next day, Timothy's mom called back. Kate had indeed reached out to her, asking to come over to talk. Timothy's mom had agreed to meet with her. After that conversation, Timothy's mom called Timothy again. She said Kate had spent over an hour at their house, crying and insisting that I was turning Timothy against his family. Kate had shown his mom a series of screenshots from our family group chat, supposedly proving that I was cold and distant. Timothy's mom said she'd listened to everything Kate had to say. Then she'd asked Kate some direct questions. She'd asked Kate to explain specific incidents that Timothy had mentioned in his message. Kate apparently couldn't give clear answers. She kept saying things were being taken out of context or that Timothy was remembering things wrong. Timothy's mom told Timothy that after talking to Kate, she believed Timothy's version of events. She said she'd noticed some of Kate's behavior toward me over the past year, but had hoped it would resolve itself. She apologized for not stepping in sooner. That conversation was somewhat encouraging, but things got worse before they got better. 2 days after Timothy's mom talked to Kate, Timothy's brother called. Kate had also reached out to him. She told him that Timothy and I were planning to exclude her from all family events going forward, and that we were trying to turn the family against her. Timothy's brother said he wasn't taking sides, but he thought we should all sit down together and work things out like adults. Timothy told his brother no. He explained that he'd already tried to address the situation directly with Kate, and that she'd responded by denying everything and launching a campaign to discredit me to the rest of the family. His brother said he understood, but still thought we were handling it wrong. Then came the really ugly part. 4 days ago, Kate sent Timothy another message. This one was different. She said she'd been reflecting on everything and had realized something important. She said Timothy was in an unhealthy relationship, and that I'd been controlling and manipulating him for years. She said she had evidence of this, though she didn't specify what the evidence was. She said Timothy needed to leave me for his own well-being, and that once he did, they could repair their relationship and go back to how things used to be. Timothy showed me the message. We both just stared at it. The message made something click for both of us. Kate's behavior over the past 10 months wasn't just about disliking me. She'd been actively trying to drive a wedge between us. Every false claim, every subtle insult, every incident designed to make me look bad, all of it had been working toward this goal. She wanted me out of Timothy's life. Timothy called his parents again and read them Kate's latest message. His dad was furious. He said Kate had crossed a line and needed professional help. Timothy's mom said she'd try to talk to Kate again, but Timothy told her not to bother. He said he was done with Kate for the foreseeable future. We spent the next 2 days talking about everything. Timothy took full responsibility for not addressing the situation sooner. He said he'd been so focused on not wanting to believe his sister was capable of this behavior that he'd ignored all the red flags. He apologized for lying to me about Kate's apology months ago. He said he'd thought at the time that smoothing things over would make the problem go away. But he understood now that it had only made things worse. We decided together that Kate would not be in our wedding. Timothy sent her a brief message stating that due to recent events, we were making changes to the wedding party, and she would no longer be included. He also told her he needed space from her indefinitely. Kate responded with one final message. She told Timothy he was making the biggest mistake of his life. She said I'd successfully isolated him from his sister, and that one day he'd realize what he'd lost. She said, when that day came, she might not be willing to forgive him. Then she blocked Timothy on everything. Timothy's parents have been supportive. His mom called yesterday to check in on both of us. She said Kate had been over to their house again, and that the conversation hadn't gone well. Kate is apparently telling everyone who will listen that Timothy is being abused and controlled. Timothy's mom said she and Timothy's dad have made it clear to Kate that they don't believe her version of events, and that she needs to take responsibility for her behavior. Timothy's brother is still trying to stay neutral, which is frustrating. But Timothy's cousin, the one Kate had lied to about me criticizing their grandmother's house, reached out to Timothy. She said she'd always found Kate's version of that story suspicious, and now everything made sense. She apologized for not questioning it at the time. The wedding is still happening. We're down one attendant on Timothy's side, but we've decided not to replace her. We're actually both feeling better about the whole event now that we know Kate won't be there. The hard part is that Timothy is grieving his relationship with his sister. They'd been close his whole life, and now that's gone. He keeps saying he can't believe it came to this. But he also says he should have seen it sooner, and that if he'd addressed it months ago, maybe it wouldn't have escalated this far. We're not talking about what happens after the wedding. Right now, Kate is completely out of our lives. Whether that changes in the future is something we'll deal with when and if it becomes relevant. For now, we're focused on moving forward. Timothy booked us a weekend trip to a cabin his family owns upstate. We're leaving on Friday. I think we both need the time away to process everything without the constant barrage of messages and family phone calls. Update 2. Things have somehow gotten worse, which I didn't think was possible. I'm writing this because I need to document what happened while it's still fresh. 3 weeks ago, Timothy and I were doing well. We'd had our weekend at the cabin, which helped. We were planning the wedding without the constant stress of worrying about Kate. Timothy's parents were supportive. We'd started to move on. Then, 2 Mondays ago, Timothy got a message from Kate. It came mid-morning while Timothy was at work. He called me immediately after reading it. The message was long and completely unhinged. Kate started by saying she'd been giving Timothy time to come to his senses, but that clearly wasn't happening. She said she'd tried to be subtle, tried to give him space to figure things out on his own, but now she needed to be direct. Kate claimed that I was emotionally abusing Timothy. She said she'd been documenting concerning behaviors for over a year. She said she had proof that I was isolating him from his family, controlling his decisions, and manipulating him into believing she was the problem when really I was the toxic one. She said Timothy needed to leave me immediately for his own mental health and safety. Then came the part that made everything make sense. Kate wrote that this was the conversation she'd been hoping to have with Timothy in person, the one she'd wanted a mediator for. She said she'd been planning to stage an intervention with Timothy's family to help him see the truth. But since Timothy had cut her off, she was left with no choice but to lay everything out in writing. Kate ended the message by saying that if Timothy left me, she'd be willing to forgive him for the past few months. She said they could go back to being close like before, and she'd help him rebuild his life. She said she just wanted her brother back. Timothy forwarded me the entire message. We talked on the phone for almost an hour. Timothy was shaken. He said the message revealed that Kate had been planning this campaign against me for much longer than we'd realized. Every incident, every lie, every manipulation had been building toward the goal of getting rid of me. We talked about the specific things Kate had done over the past year, and with this new context, they all looked different. Timothy mentioned an incident from about 14 months ago that I'd forgotten about. We'd been at a family barbecue. Timothy and I had arrived together, but Kate had immediately pulled Timothy aside, saying she needed his help with something. She'd kept him occupied for almost an hour. When he finally came back to where I was sitting, Kate had followed him and positioned herself between us for the rest of the event. Timothy also remembered that Kate had started making comments about our relationship almost immediately after we got engaged. She'd asked him multiple times if he was sure about getting married. She'd mentioned how young we still were, how much life we had ahead of us, how permanent marriage was. At the time, Timothy had thought she was just being a concerned sister. Now he realized she'd been planting seeds of doubt. There was also the time about 8 months ago when Kate had invited Timothy to go on a weekend trip with her and some friends. She'd specifically said it was a siblings thing, and that significant others weren't invited. Timothy had gone. When he came back, he'd been distant for a few days. I'd asked him if something had happened on the trip. He'd said no. Just that Kate had talked a lot about their childhood and how things had changed since they'd both started getting serious with partners. I'd let it go at the time. Now Timothy told me that during that trip, Kate had spent hours telling him about relationships she'd seen fail. She'd focused particularly on situations where one person in the relationship had changed the other person's relationship with their family. She'd never mentioned me by name, but the message had been clear. Looking back at all these moments with the knowledge of what Kate had been trying to do made everything more disturbing. She hadn't just disliked me. She'd been running a calculated long-term campaign to break us up. After we got off the phone, Timothy decided he needed to tell his parents about the latest message. He drove to their house that evening. I stayed home. Timothy called me later that night. His parents had been horrified by Kate's message. His dad had said that Kate needed serious help and that they'd failed as parents by not recognizing how deep her issues went. Timothy's mom had cried. She'd said she kept thinking about all the times over the past year when she'd noticed Kate's behavior toward me, but had chalked it up to wedding stress or Kate being moody. Timothy's parents said they were going to have a serious conversation with Kate. Timothy told them he didn't want them to do it on his behalf, that he was done trying to fix things with her. But his parents said they needed to do it as parents, regardless of whether it changed anything between Timothy and Kate. That conversation between Timothy's parents and Kate happened last week. I don't know all the details, but Timothy's mom called him afterward and said it had been difficult. Kate had apparently doubled down on her claims about me. She'd insisted she had evidence. When Timothy's mom asked to see this evidence, Kate had said she'd need to compile it properly, but that it existed. Timothy's mom had then told Kate directly that she and Timothy's dad didn't believe Kate's claims, that they'd seen enough of my and Timothy's relationship to know it was healthy, and that Kate's behavior over the past year had been inappropriate and hurtful. Kate had left their house angry. Since then, Kate has been posting vague things on social media about betrayal and family loyalty. She's also apparently been reaching out to extended family members with her version of events. Timothy's aunt called him 3 days ago, asking if everything was okay because Kate had told her some concerning things. Timothy gave his aunt a brief overview of the situation. His aunt said she'd suspected Kate was exaggerating, but had wanted to check in. The most disturbing development came yesterday. Timothy got a message from one of his childhood friends, someone he's known since elementary school but doesn't talk to regularly anymore. The friend said Kate had contacted him, asking if he'd noticed any changes in Timothy over the past few years. She'd told this friend that she was worried about Timothy's relationship and wanted to know if Timothy had seemed different or isolated. The friend had apparently told Kate that Timothy seemed happy and that he didn't know what she was talking about. But the fact that Kate had reached out to someone Timothy barely spoke to anymore, trying to find anyone who might support her narrative, showed how desperate she'd become. Timothy and I have been talking about what Kate's behavior actually was. The calculated nature of it, the long-term planning, the willingness to lie to family members and friends, all of it points to something more serious than just not liking me. We've also been going back through the past year and identifying other incidents that now look suspicious. There was the time Kate had called Timothy late at night, claiming she was having a crisis and needed him to come over immediately. Timothy had gone, leaving me at our apartment. When he got to Kate's place, she'd seemed fine. She'd said the crisis had passed, but since he was there, they might as well hang out. Timothy had stayed for 2 hours, feeling obligated. There was the time Kate had told Timothy's mom that she'd seen me out with a man who wasn't Timothy, being overly friendly. Timothy's mom had mentioned it to Timothy, concerned. Timothy had asked me about it, and I'd been confused because I hadn't been out with anyone. We'd eventually figured out that Kate must have seen me with a male co-worker at a coffee shop near my office, having a work discussion. But Kate had described it in a way that made it sound romantic. There was the time Kate had posted a photo on social media of her and Timothy from when they were kids, with a caption about how family bonds were the strongest bonds, and how nothing could replace the people who'd known you your whole life. It had seemed innocent at the time, but now it looked like another message aimed at me. The accumulated weight of all these incidents is overwhelming. Kate spent over a year trying to destroy my relationship with Timothy, and she came close to succeeding. If Timothy hadn't finally listened to me, if he'd continued making excuses for her, we wouldn't be planning a wedding right now. Timothy keeps saying he can't believe his sister is capable of this level of manipulation. But the evidence is clear. Kate decided she didn't want me in Timothy's life, and she did everything in her power to make that happen. The wedding is now 3 months away. We've moved forward with all the planning. Timothy's parents will be there. His brother is still coming, though things are tense between him and Timothy, because the brother thinks Timothy should try harder to reconcile with Kate. Several cousins and extended family members have reached out with support. Kate is not invited. We sent new invitations to the family members who would have expected her to be there, making it clear that the guest list had changed. No one has pushed back on that decision. Timothy says he's at peace with Kate being permanently out of his life, but I see him get quiet sometimes, and I know he's thinking about her. You don't just lose a sibling and move on, even when that sibling did what Kate did. Update 3. The wedding happened. It's done. We're married. But the situation with Kate reached one final absurd peak that I need to document. 2 weeks before the wedding, we were in the final stages of preparation. Guest list finalized, seating chart done, final payment sent to the venue. Timothy and I were both taking time off work the week before the wedding to handle last-minute details. Then Timothy's brother called. He said Kate had reached out to him with a request. She wanted to come to the wedding, not as part of the wedding party, just as a guest. She told Timothy's brother that she'd been doing a lot of thinking, that she realized she'd made mistakes, and that she wanted to be there to support Timothy on his big day. Timothy's brother said he thought we should consider it. He said it was a gesture of goodwill from Kate, and that turning her away would only make the family rift worse. He said Kate had promised to stay in the background and not cause any problems. Timothy told his brother no immediately. He said Kate had spent over a year trying to destroy our relationship, had sent him a message calling me abusive, and had been telling family members lies about me for months. He said there was no version of reality where Kate would be welcome at our wedding. Timothy's brother argued. He said family should forgive family. He said Kate was Timothy's sister and would regret missing the wedding. He said we were being unnecessarily harsh. Timothy ended the phone call. An hour later, Timothy's mom called. Kate had also reached out to her with the same request. Timothy's mom said she'd told Kate no, that she understood why Timothy and I didn't want her there. But she wanted to give Timothy a heads up that Kate might try to reach out directly. Kate didn't reach out to Timothy. Instead, she messaged me. I hadn't heard from Kate in months. Seeing her name pop up on my phone screen was jarring. The message was short. Kate said she knew I was probably the one preventing Timothy from letting her attend the wedding. She said if I cared about Timothy at all, I'd convince him to let her be there. She said family was important, and that one day I'd understand that. I screenshot the message and sent it to Timothy. Then I blocked Kate's number. Timothy called his mom back and told her about Kate's message to me. His mom was furious. She said she'd talk to Kate again and make it absolutely clear that neither of us wanted her at the wedding, and that she needed to stop trying to manipulate the situation. The week before the wedding arrived, we were busy enough that Kate drama took a back seat. Timothy's parents helped with setup. His dad handled some vendor coordination. His mom helped me with final dress alterations. Timothy's brother kept his distance, but confirmed he'd be at the ceremony. The day before the wedding, Timothy and I were at the venue doing a final walkthrough. Timothy's phone rang. It was his dad. Timothy put the call on speaker. Timothy's dad said he needed to warn us about something. Kate had called him that morning, asking for the specific address of the wedding venue. Timothy's dad had refused to give it to her. Kate had then said she'd figure it out anyway, that she had a right to be there, and that she wasn't going to let me ruin her relationship with her brother. Timothy's dad said he'd told Kate that if she showed up at the wedding, he'd personally escort her out. But he wanted us to be prepared in case she tried anyway. Timothy and I talked to the venue coordinator. We gave her a photo of Kate and told her Kate was not welcome at the event. The coordinator said she'd alert security and that they'd handle it if Kate appeared. The wedding day arrived. Morning preparations went smoothly. Timothy and I had decided to get ready in separate areas of the venue. I was with my bridesmaids and Timothy's mom. Timothy was with his groomsmen and his dad. About an hour before the ceremony was scheduled to start, one of the venue staff knocked on the door of the bridal suite. She said there was a woman outside the venue demanding to be let in. The woman claimed she was the groom's sister, and that there had been a misunderstanding about the guest list. Kate had actually shown up. Timothy's mom left the bridal suite immediately. I stayed where I was with my bridesmaids, trying to focus on getting ready. One of my friends offered to go see what was happening, but I told her to stay. I didn't want Kate to become the focal point of my wedding day. Timothy's mom came back 15 minutes later. She said Kate had been outside the main entrance, dressed in a white dress, insisting she had every right to attend. Security had already been dealing with her when Timothy's mom arrived. Timothy's dad and Timothy had also come out. Timothy had told Kate to leave. Kate had refused and started crying, saying she just wanted to be there for her brother. Timothy's dad had then told Kate that if she didn't leave immediately, they'd call the police. Kate had finally left, but not before shouting at Timothy that he'd regret this and that I'd destroyed their family. The ceremony happened as planned. It was beautiful. Timothy and I got married surrounded by people who actually cared about both of us. Timothy's parents were there. His brother showed up but left immediately after the ceremony, which was fine. Extended family and friends filled the venue. The day was everything we'd hoped it would be. Kate didn't return. Security stayed alert, but there were no further incidents. At the reception, Timothy's dad gave a speech. He mentioned family, but he also talked about the importance of choosing people who build you up rather than tear you down. He said he was proud of Timothy for recognizing what he needed in his life and for having the courage to set boundaries. It wasn't directly about Kate, but everyone understood what he was really saying. Timothy and I left for our honeymoon the next day. We went to Costa Rica, somewhere neither of us had been before. We spent a week on the beach not thinking about Kate or family drama or any of it. We've been back for 2 weeks now. Timothy's mom called a few days after we returned. She said Kate has been posting on social media about being excluded from her brother's wedding, painting herself as the victim. Several family members have apparently reached out to Kate with support, people who don't know the full story. Timothy's mom said she and Timothy's dad have been doing damage control, explaining the situation to anyone who asks. Timothy's brother sent Timothy a text last week. He said he understood why Timothy had made the choices he made, and that he hoped they could rebuild their relationship now that the wedding was over. Timothy hasn't responded yet. He's still frustrated that his brother tried to advocate for Kate having a place at our wedding after everything she did. As for Kate, Timothy has no plans to ever speak to her again. His parents still have contact with her, but they've made it clear they don't agree with her behavior and won't be facilitating any reconciliation. Timothy's dad told Timothy that Kate is his daughter, and he can't cut her off completely, but that he understands Timothy's decision and supports it. The extended family situation is complicated. Some people believe Kate's version of events. Others have figured out the truth. Timothy and I have decided we're not going to spend energy trying to convince anyone of anything. The people who matter know what really happened. We've started our married life. We have our own apartment, our own routines, our own plans for the future. Kate isn't part of that future, and we're both okay with that. Timothy still has moments where he gets sad about losing his sister. He told me a few days ago that he wishes things could have been different, that Kate could have just been happy for him. But he also says he's done making excuses for people who don't respect the life he's chosen. We're not going to therapy. We've talked through everything ourselves, and we're on solid ground now. Timothy set boundaries with his sister and enforced them. I found a partner who's willing to stand up for me. That's enough. The wedding day is behind us now. Kate's attempt to crash it failed. We're moving forward without her, and life is better for it.